Not after a loss. Not in a post-game press conference where coaches typically retreat into safe, rehearsed language designed to reveal nothing and offend nobody. Not about a player on the opposing team, a player whose Dodgers had just beaten them, whose performance had once again left the stadium buzzing with the kind of energy that doesn't dissipate when the final out is recorded. But Mike Shildt stood at that podium, looked into the cameras, and said exactly what he felt. Unscripted. Unguarded. Completely honest. And the moment those words left his mouth, something shifted. In the press room. In the broadcast booths. In every sports newsroom across America that monitors post-game pressers for anything worth covering. Because what Shildt said wasn't analysis. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't the carefully worded respect that rival managers typically extend to opposing stars with one eye on the competitive implications. It was something far rarer. It was genuine admiration, the kind that crosses team lines, crosses competitive instinct, crosses every professional boundary that usually keeps coaches from saying out loud what they actually think about the player who just beat them. And American media didn't know what to do with it. The Dodgers and Padres share one of the most intense rivalries in the National League West. These are not teams that extend courtesies lightly. The history between these franchises is written in tight finishes, disputed calls, and the particular kind of competitive bitterness that only develops between organizations that have fought each other for the same division title across multiple seasons. In that context, a Padres manager praising a Dodgers player after a loss is not simply noteworthy. It is almost structurally unusual. It cuts against the grain of everything the rivalry demands from both sides. So when Shildt began speaking after the game, the reporters in that room were prepared for the standard language. Prepared for careful deflection. Prepared for the professional acknowledgement that stops well short of anything resembling genuine feeling. What they were not prepared for was the truth. Shildt didn't just acknowledge Ohtani's performance. He spoke about his character. He spoke about specific moments he had observed, not from highlight reels, not from broadcast coverage, but from the vantage point of a manager who watches opposing players with professional scrutiny and notices things that cameras don't always catch. He spoke about what Ohtani does between pitches. What he does in the on-deck circle. How he carries himself when his team is down, and how he carries himself when his team is ahead. He spoke about the consistency of it, the fact that the version of Ohtani you see in April is the same version you see in August, that the composure doesn't fluctuate with the stakes, that the focus doesn't waver with the score. And then he said something that no rival manager had said publicly before. He said Ohtani makes the game better by being in it. Within minutes of the press conference ending, the clip was circulating. By the time the post-game shows went live, every major baseball broadcast in America was playing it. By morning, it had been quoted, analyzed, debated, and dissected across every platform that covers the sport. Because what Shildt said wasn't a compliment in the conventional sense. A compliment praises what someone does. What Shildt articulated was something deeper, a statement about what Ohtani represents to the sport itself. Not just to the Dodgers. Not just to Japanese baseball fans watching from across the Pacific. To the game. To everyone who participates in it, watches it, or loves it. That distinction matters enormously. And American media understood it immediately. ESPN's analysts spent a segment not on Ohtani's statistics but on the cultural weight of a rival manager making that statement. MLB Network's commentary that evening kept returning to the same question: when was the last time a manager praised an opposing player not for what he did on the field, but for what he does to the field simply by standing on it? The answer, most agreed, was that they couldn't remember. Not in this way. Not with this specificity. Not after a loss. The answer, characteristically, is both everything and nothing that could be easily summarized in a box score. His at-bats were exceptional. That much is measurable. His pitch recognition was operating at a level that forced the Padres pitching staff to abandon plans mid-sequence, to reach for secondary pitches earlier than intended, to operate in a state of constant tactical adjustment that is exhausting over 9 innings. When Ohtani makes contact, the entire outfield shifts imperceptibly, not because they are instructed to in that moment, but because experience has taught them that the ball, when he hits it cleanly, goes somewhere that requires covering. He reached base multiple times. He scored. He drove in runs in the moments that compressed the game's outcome into its tightest, most consequential shape. But none of that is what Shildt was talking about. What Shildt was talking about was a moment in the sixth inning that most casual viewers probably didn't register. The Dodgers were ahead, but not comfortably. The Padres had momentum. The crowd in San Diego was loud in the particular way that signals a rally being born, that cumulative energy of singles and walks and errors that begins to feel like inevitability. Ohtani was in the on-deck circle. And according to those watching closely from the dugout, he was completely still. Not tense. Not animated by the momentum shift around him. Still in the way that communicates something specific, not passivity, but absolute internal organization. The kind of stillness that comes not from ignoring what's happening, but from having already processed it and returned to center. The Padres got their out. The inning ended. The momentum dissolved. And Shildt, watching from his dugout, saw that stillness and understood exactly what it meant. That sentence, more than any other from the press conference, is the one that baseball analysts kept returning to in the hours and days that followed. Because it identifies something about Ohtani that is genuinely difficult to explain to people who haven't seen it consistently. Elite athletes prepare. That is not unusual. Every player at the major league level has a preparation routine. Every player studies scouting reports, reviews video, thinks through sequences and counts and tendencies. Preparation is the baseline requirement for existing at this level. What Ohtani does is different in degree to the point where it becomes different in kind. Former players who have spent time around him speak about it with a particular quality in their voice, not quite awe, but something adjacent to it. The recognition of someone who has seen elite preparation their entire career and is now encountering something that operates on a different scale entirely. His pre-game routine begins earlier than most players arrive at the stadium. His film study is not passive review but active interrogation, not just watching what pitchers throw, but building predictive models in his mind for specific counts, specific game states, specific emotional moments in a game when a pitcher is most likely to reach for the pitch that feels most comfortable. By the time Ohtani steps into the batter's box, he has already lived through hundreds of versions of that at-bat in preparation. That is why he can be still in the on-deck circle while momentum shifts around him. He has already been there. He has already made the decisions. The game is simply confirming what he has already prepared for. Shildt, who has spent decades in professional baseball developing and observing players, recognized that quality immediately. And he respected it enough to say so publicly, competitive implications be damned. There is an unwritten code in professional sports that governs how coaches speak about opposing players. Respect is permitted. Acknowledgement of talent is standard. But deep, specific, personal admiration for a rival, particularly after a loss, particularly across one of the sport's most charged rivalries, is something that careers in coaching tend to train out of people. You learn to be measured. You learn to protect competitive information. You learn that genuine enthusiasm for an opposing player, however justified, can be used against you in ways both practical and psychological. The safe answer is always the neutral answer. Shildt chose not to give the safe answer. And in doing so, he communicated something important, not just about Ohtani, but about the nature of what Ohtani's presence does to the people around him. Even rivals. Even competitors who have every professional reason to minimize what they feel. One veteran baseball reporter wrote the following morning that Shildt's comments were the most honest post-game assessment of an opposing player he had heard in 20 years of covering the sport. Not the most flattering. Not the most dramatic. The most honest. The most grounded in specific observation rather than general reputation. The most clearly the product of a man who had watched carefully and was reporting what he had actually seen. That quality, that specificity, is what gave the words their weight. Anyone can say Ohtani is great. His statistics make that statement require no courage. What Shildt did was describe why he is great in terms that go beyond statistics entirely. And that is a fundamentally different act. The part of Shildt's remarks that drew the most sustained attention was his comments about Ohtani's character specifically. Because Shildt did not simply describe what Ohtani does on the field. He made assertions, clear, direct, unambiguous assertions, about who Ohtani is as a person. He said that in his observation, Ohtani's consistency between his public presence and his private behavior is complete. That the humility he shows in interviews is not performance. That the respect he demonstrates toward opponents, umpires, and teammates is not strategy. That the composure under pressure is not trained suppression of emotion but the authentic expression of a person who has genuinely organized his inner life around clarity and purpose. These are not things you can verify through statistics. They are not things that appear in scouting reports. They are the kind of character assessments that only become available to people who have watched someone carefully over time, which, in a rivalry as sustained as Dodgers versus Padres, Shildt has had the opportunity to do. American media reacted to this portion of his remarks with something approaching discomfort. Not because the claims were implausible, but because they were so direct. Because making character assertions about any public figure, let alone a player of Ohtani's magnitude, is the kind of statement that invites scrutiny, that demands evidence, that places the person making it in a position of genuine accountability. Shildt made them anyway. And the more analysts examined them, the more they found that the evidence supported every word. What Shildt's comments ultimately revealed is something that statistics, highlight reels, and contract figures have never been able to fully capture about Shohei Ohtani. He is not simply a great baseball player. He is a person whose greatness has a quality that transcends the sport, a quality that makes rivals speak honestly after losses, that makes teammates review notes after home runs, that makes the stillest moment in the on-deck circle more instructive than most players' most animated performances. That quality has a name. It is called integrity. The specific kind of integrity that comes from years of private discipline becoming so thoroughly internalized that there is no gap between the person in the spotlight and the person when no one is watching. Shildt saw it. He named it. And in doing so, he gave American media not just a story about a press conference, but a lens through which to understand why Ohtani's impact on this game extends so far beyond anything a box score can hold. The Padres lost that night. But their manager left that press room having said something true. Something specific. Something that will be quoted long after the final score is forgotten. And perhaps that is its own kind of victory. Shohei Ohtani is not simply performing at an extraordinary level. He is doing something rarer and more significant. He is raising the standard of what it means to be a professional baseball player, simply by being one himself. Rival managers are noticing. Rival players are noticing. American media, for all its noise and volume, is slowly arriving at the same conclusion that everyone who watches closely enough always arrives at. This is not just greatness. This is something we should be paying very close attention to. Because moments like this, a rival manager standing at a podium after a loss and speaking the unguarded truth, don't happen often.